Springtime in interior Alaska. Breakup. Warmth from the sun changes the landscape. Ice that locked rivers for so many months begins to move, scouring the banks and renewing the river for another season. As streams and rivers come alive, Alaska villages also awaken. Spring marks the start of supply season and summer activity on the Yukon River. For people living in many Alaska bush villages, the Yukon and its tributaries are a vital link to basic supplies. Towboats like the Ramona and the Tanana deliver all sorts of goods throughout the summer season. People like Jonathan Penns rely on the river barges to bring essentials, such as diesel to fuel his family's mining operation.
It's so expensive to get stuff out here. It's not like anything like living in town where you can just go down to the nearest store and buy what you need. You have to plan ahead. You have to plan a whole year, sometimes 2 years ahead for what you're thinking about doing. If you want to build something, you got to get it on the barge a year before you want it. The only way to do it out here where there's no stores around.
River travel has always been essential to life in the interior. People crafted birch bark canoes and skin boats to travel long distances during summer months. Explorer Vitus Bering claimed Alaska for Russia in 1741, and while the Russians developed an extensive fur trade, Alaska's interior and the Yukon remained largely untouched. It wasn't until America bought Alaska from the Russians in 1867 that steamboat traffic on the river began. With gold fever in the 1890s, Yukon travel exploded. The famous Klondike Gold Rush fueled the imagination of pioneers. Hundreds of vessels of all types and sizes ferried miners and the tools of their trade. Boots and bedrolls, picks and shovels, all made their way to boomtowns along the river. Hard on the heels of the sourdoughs came a variety of settlers. They counted on river travel to reach their destinations and to bring the raw materials to help build their new lives. The boats of the day were often modest working vessels, but some were impressive and luxurious, steamboats and paddle wheelers that called to mind travel on the famous Mississippi. Nowadays, river vessels are usually of the humble variety. Hard-working boats take barges of freight from village to village. One of these towboats is the MV Tanana. It's owned by Utana Barge Lines and operates out of Nenana, Alaska. The crew is preparing for the final supply trip of the summer. The towboat and barges retrace the same routes pioneers used more than a century ago. From Nenana, down the Tanana River to the Yukon, and then on to Imanik, just inland from the Bering Sea. Cranes and forklifts make loading the barges easier than it was in the 1890s, but the process still takes time. Once the cargo is on board, it's ready to head downriver. The round-trip journey on the Yukon will take 3 to 4 weeks. Navigating glacial rivers like the Tanana and Yukon is difficult. Glacier-fed rivers are silty. In other words, you can't see beneath the surface of the water. The river continually changes course and sandbars ebb and flow, creating new obstacles every day. Martha Demienteiff knows the rivers well. She and her husband Claude Sr. built a family business delivering freight to river communities. Having worked the waterways for decades, she knows the Tanana and Yukon.
The Tanana is all silt. It's when we get stuck on the Tanana River, just look over the side and you'll see the sandbar building up on one side of the barge. You might be stuck and pretty soon 11 hours later you washed out and you're going again.
To avoid hitting ground, boat captains have always used some form of the navigation technique called sounding. Martha Demienteiff's son Claude Jr. was just a boy when he first started sounding or sensing the way to the best channel.
Go as fast as you can with the stick dipping in the water. Hit the bottom. Every time you touch, you feel if it was hard or soft. And that would tell you what's happening to the channel or the river. And you find where the edges are and how wide it is and mark the channel.
I remember going to the front of the barge and sounding for him. And I'd stick that pole in the water and hold it up with my hand just so he could see how deep the water is. No, if I stuck a pole in the water, it would throw me overboard. But we were strong and tough and young.
For the most part, the simple method of sounding with a pole has been replaced with electronic depth finders. For years, the Demienteiff family used a combination of sounding methods from a small pilot boat to steer their towboat and barges. To help guide the Tanana, Captain Keith Horton relies primarily on depth sounders. Pilot Kevin Knutson uses radio to relay sounding information from the sounding boat to the captain.
We have to sound a lot of the crossings, which means we'll find the underwater edges of the channel, find out where the sandbars are and where the lumps have moved around to. On the Tanana River, the channels change quite a lot, even from day to day. I basically find the channel for the tug to follow me through. I'll run out in the sounding boat and get several miles ahead of him and get a course set up to cross from bank to bank.
Pretty good wind here. I'm in 14s, 13s.
The tug and barges require 4 feet of water to operate. There are many places in the Tanana River where finding a channel that deep and wide enough to accommodate the barges can be tricky.
Here I'm sitting in 4s and 5s. Okay. And it narrows up a little bit behind me.
You got 1,000 tons of freight on 2 barges, and it takes quite a while to stop it, to make the corners. So a lot of it's got to be drifted and stop and make turns. A lot of maneuvering for a lot of miles there.
I don't know, it's pretty narrow all the way through here.
The boat is approaching Squaw Crossing, where the Tanana River meets the Yukon. The river here is wide and the channel changes constantly. The crew is trying to get through a narrow braid of river that will avoid the shallows.
That's as far as we go. We touch on the starboard there.
The sounder is reading just over 4 feet. One of the barges has hit bottom. The only way to dislodge the barge may be to spin the towboat and barges around.
I don't really want to go through this one backwards. I'm not going to have a choice now.
Floating in 4s on the meter here, you should swing right on around.
It's about 4 feet all the way along here on the starboard side. One lump here on the port side, about 3.5 feet.
With some maneuvering, and using the wash of the boat's own propellers to help create a channel, the crew is able to spin the tow around and carefully back down the slough. The second day after leaving its dock, the boat has reached the Yukon. The first stop is the village of Tanana. Here, crew members wait for another towboat to navigate the course they've just traversed. It will bring a third barge for the Tanana to add to its line. The width of the Yukon makes it possible and more efficient to push 3 barges instead of just 2. On the third morning, the boat leaves Tanana village and heads downriver, moving 3 barges fully loaded with fuel and freight. Small villages dot the riverbanks. Ruby, Galena, Nulato, Kaltag, they've all had recent deliveries from other vessels. The first unloading for this run is in Grayling.
There's no real docking facilities that are available. We'll set timbers out, large laminated timbers, and we'll set 2 of them out to run the forklifts off of to haul the freight off the barges. Fuel will run out a 4-inch cargo line. We load some very large equipment. We'll load D9s, D8s. A lot of times we haul some extremely large crates, telephone poles that are 40 feet long. We've unloaded house trailers. The drill trucks are extremely heavy, long, and then anything from a box of nails to a dump truck. I mean, there's just such a large variety.
Although Utana Barge Lines delivers a variety of freight, its primary cargo is fuel. Some barges can carry up to 200,000 gallons of diesel fuel and gasoline every run down the river. Fuel is essential for a variety of rural activities. Construction companies must operate their equipment. Villages maintain their own power plants and require huge amounts of diesel to function. Plus, villagers rely on fuel to fire their generators and propel four-wheelers, boats, and snowmobiles. For Utana Barge Lines, fuel loads are the first priority. But for the Demienteiff family, freight always took precedence, and it wasn't economical to start downriver with any empty deck space.
Each of those steel barges could hold about 60 tons. Dad always used to say, you can't make money with freeboard. And inevitably, when the barge was all loaded, somebody would always come down with one more vehicle. Of course, there was space. It doesn't hurt to get tires wet a little bit. Dad will put it on.
Just right. Bulky things, there's machinery. We haul a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of building materials. And even though some of the things were light, they were bulky, like insulation and stuff like that.
3 or 4 vehicles, many bundles of building material, several pallets of furniture, odds and ends.
Claude Jr. found the goals of his family's business compatible with Utana Barge Line's emphasis on large loads of fuel.
You know, for them to turn around 600, 700 tons to drop off a single tank of propane at a fish camp is a major chore, major expense. But we could do that. They would haul what we couldn't haul, and we would haul what they would be reluctant or be too expensive to haul.
We traveled down the river and stopped at every village, and we went all the way from Fairbanks to Sheldon's Point, the mouth of the Yukon, the last village on the Yukon, all the way up the KUAC River to Alakakit.
Inoko, and up the Yukon as far as Circle.
For the Demienteiffs, taking freight to small villages meant more than dropping off cargo on a shoreline.
People would come on board, and everybody shake hands. That's how it was, every village.
My husband treated the guy that was getting 1 bottle of propane just as well as he treated this guy with 500 tons. If you were 80 years old, you get free freight on our company. And so he had quite a few little old people that he would haul their freight for free. Well, we're small enough we could know people personally and you know their age.
Utana Barge Lines may be a larger company, but the crew still has lots of interaction with local people. In the village of Holy Cross, they pump fuel to a community holding tank and deliver building materials. The next stop is Shagaluk, a small village on the Anoco River. All the fuel and freight for Shagaluk is loaded on one barge. The crew can leave 2 of their 3 barges near Holy Cross. Negotiating the Anoco with a smaller load will speed up the trip, about 48 hours to head upriver, offload, and come back for the other barges. The barge comes to Shagaluk only twice a year. The heating oil and gasoline delivered on this trip has to last through the long, dark winter months. After finishing their work in Shagaluk, the crew returns to their barges. They make up tow and continue down the Yukon. It's dark by the time they reach Russian Mission. The crew works all night unloading freight, including the winter supply of propane. By sunrise, the boat and barges are heading downriver again. Now, the destination is Pilot Station. The crew pumps more fuel and brings boats bought in Fairbanks to their owners. The next stop, St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a small transportation hub located a few miles up the Andreevsky River. It looks more like a port than any place the Tanana has visited since first leaving home. Other Utana Barge Line boats work out of St. Mary's as they shuttle barges to communities throughout the Yukon River Delta. Some of the freight will be transferred to other barges here and taken to communities on the coast. As the boat approaches the Bering Sea, the river widens and the land begins to reflect a coastal influence. Imanik is close to the mouth of the Yukon. Once a quick ramp is created on the bank, the crew offloads snowmobiles for the local store and the rest of the deck freight.
Why don't you go ahead and sign right across there? I don't know if you have it or not.
The Tanana has reached the end of the line for this trip. With all the cargo unloaded, the crew turns back upriver and starts the slow trip toward home. But they won't make the return trip completely empty-handed. Along the way, the crew picks up a crane destined for Nenana. In Galena, the crew loads equipment and surplus freight bound for a military base near Fairbanks. Upriver travel against the current is slow going, but for the crew, slow isn't necessarily bad.
Going downriver, we're pretty busy. It doesn't take very long to get from stop to stop. On the way back upstream, it's quite a bit slower. Everybody seems to get a little more rest and relaxed, and the mood changes a little bit.
Going upriver is a lot easier running for me than it is coming down. I really enjoy the last trip. It's a lot less stressful for me, and I really like the fall time with the colors and the changes. It's real pretty.
Beautiful scenery and a more tranquil pace make the trip upstream enjoyable. But at the same time, the crew is ready to get back home to friends and family.
We're basically here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5.5 months a year, 6 months a year. It's more of a lifestyle. I'm real family oriented. It was real hard at first getting used to being away from home so much.
Being away from the family, that's the toughest part. Just long hours, and it's pretty tough on a family for a job like this. I would say that's probably the toughest for anybody that's been on here.
Keeping the family together was the main reason Martha Demienteiff and her husband Claude Sr. began their riverboat business.
It wasn't worth it to us to be apart. We moved to Fairbanks and built the first boat and barge. It was a house barge, and then with whatever money we had left over, we bought stock and we started the store boat. We'd go from village to village selling anything we thought the people would need. But over the years, people had us hauling things from here to there, and eventually he just took the house off of the barge and did nothing but freighting.
Until Claude Demienteiff Sr.'s death in 1994, the Demienteiff family ran the river every summer season for decades. It was tough going at the start.
When we first started out, we didn't have any experience. We didn't even know how to go and get a business license. We didn't know how to get a loan. We didn't know what equity meant. And I must have looked worried because my husband looked at me and he said, I know how to hunt and fish and trap. So knowing our own subsistence life was the safety net under us to go into business as Native people. If we didn't know how to live that subsistence life, we would have never had the nerve to try it. And I'm glad we did it that way, so our son and our other children know both lives.
The barge business became a way of life for the Demienteiffs, as well as a livelihood.
This was nice because we were together all year round. It was something to make a home out of a boat, but it was just like a regular home. The baby got a bath every night, and everybody had their own bed and everything. That life managed to keep us humble at times, because every once in a while we'd have a big setback. We sank the tug in Fairbanks. The Ramona 2 brought up from the bottom of the Chima. And so we saved that and rebuilt it, and he remodeled the back end so it wouldn't be able to sink like that again. And then we were chartered from the Yukon Bridge to bring some stuff to the mouth of the Yukon, and it really was too late in the season to try it, but they just kept begging us. So as we were coming down, 2 barges fully loaded, we hit a sandbar quite late in the afternoon, and we couldn't get off. We couldn't get off the bar before dark, so we had to stop and wait till daylight. By then, during the night, the water had dropped another 6 inches, so it was there for the winter. That winter, they salvaged everything on it, took it out with cat train, and we lost the barge, but at least they saved the freight. We were always working, but we didn't make it like drudgery. It was like fun work. Hosing down the barge was fun. We'd wash off all that mud because it's heavy, and we liked that.
The river is part of our family. It's our old friend. Every now and then I have to go down there and wash my hands and wash my face and feel how cold or warm the water is, seeing if there's foam or sticks on the water. Get acquainted with my old friend. I like to say, blood runs thicker than silt.
As winter draws near, the river does seem to take on a personality, one whose moods are softer, more subtle. In a few short weeks, ice will begin to edge the riverbanks and mark the end of supply season on the Yukon. For towboats like the Tanana, it's time to tie up for the season and wait for next spring, when heat from the sun changes the landscape and ice that locked rivers for so many months begins to move.